Terry Law is the founder of World Compassion, an international missions organization that provides life-saving relief to persecuted people. He joins us to talk about persecution, the Middle East, and ISIS. Welcome back to the Harvey Show, Terry.
Wonderful to be here.
Okay, so you travel. You're a world traveler providing life-saving relief to people in the Middle East. Kind of talk about your work there in Iraq and Iran.
We work 30 miles from ISIS in northern Iraq. We feed 4,500 refugees every day. We've worked with LeSEA over the years in getting food over to that part of the world. It's very needy. The movement of people now in Syria itself and the entire Middle East is incredible. They're flooding into Europe. I mean, we're watching on our television sets people coming into Europe by the multiplied thousands. We are in the process of, we've located Yazidi widows who've been raped and horrible things done to them by ISIS. And we are in the process of preparing to help them and to do something for them in a humanitarian way. But we've put 50,000 sets of shoes on the ground for Iraqi children. Most of them had never seen shoes before. It was an emotional thing trying to hand shoes out to children who've never seen shoes. I remember one little girl in an orphanage, and we'd given her shoes, fit it so it fit on her foot, and she got up and took the shoes off. And I asked the guy who was with me, I said, why won't you wear the shoes? And he said, well, and then he asked her, and she said, they're so beautiful, I don't want to get them dirty. It just, it totally touched my heart. But we're doing that kind of work. We've been there now for probably close to 12 years. We've seen all of the ebbs and flows in Iraq, and we've been blessed to be friends with the Kurds in the north of Iraq. The Kurds are not Arab, they are their own people. And they have given us freedom to declare the gospel there. I've led several refugee camp leaders to Jesus over the last several years, and we're busy. We're busy.
You also talk about like being in the danger zone, you know, being there, and that's why you have written this book called Unmasking ISIS. I mean, have you ever had any encounters with the terrorist?
We've been around where they are. They put a hit on my life at one time, which was unsuccessful. This is back when Al-Qaeda was morphing into ISIS. ISIS really came from Al-Qaeda. And I did television up in northern Iraq, and they put a hit on me, and I was able to escape. The government helped me escape the ambush. They were going to get me on the road to Baghdad, which thankfully didn't happen. And but so, you know, I'm over there. I've seen what they do. It's a hard thing to even look at. Writing this book was probably the hardest book I've ever had to write. Just it's the crucifixion, the beheadings, the treatment of women. It's the everything that ISIS does in trying to be pure Muslim. That's what they believe. They believe they are the best Muslims in the world, because they do what Muhammad did. And Muhammad cut people's heads off, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they think that's the way we want to go, and we're going to be the purest Muslims in the world.
Well, that leads to my question, Dr. Law, which is, we hear so much from the Western media about ISIS has perverted Islam. ISIS are radical Islamic terrorists. That phrase was just used last week at the Republican National Convention. Is ISIS perverting Islam?
It depends on how you read the Quran, and that's totally where it is. Muhammad wrote the Quran at two different time spaces in his life. The first part of the Quran that he wrote was peaceful. The second part of the Quran is very warlike, and Muslim teachers think that they should be obedient to the warlike portions of the Quran, but the Quran will contradict itself, in my mind. as I've read it and studied to write the book, I became very much aware that there's a huge conflict in Islam itself. And you can see that with the Sunni and Shia in the Middle East. They're killing each other, and there will be no peace in Iraq as long as 20% of Iraq is Sunni and 60% of Iraq is Shia. And they're living together, they're fighting each other. It's always been a dicey situation from the beginning. And for us to think that we can create a country in Iraq as it used to be, with you've got, as I said, 20% Sunni, 60% Shia, and then you've got 20% Kurd in the north, who are a different group of people altogether. And they should never have been a nation. And that's what I write in the book. The reason that they're angry at the West is because we divided up their country back after the First World War. Britain and France, primarily, along with the collusion of the United States later, allowed Iraq to be made a country when it never had been a country. It was a part of the Ottoman Empire, and they just drew lines on a piece of paper and divided tribes from each other, like the Kurds in the north. There's 17 million Kurds in Turkey, where we had a coup attempt last week. Or at least they say it was a coup attempt. I think it was probably put up. But then you've got 10 million Kurds in Iran. You've got 8 million in Iraq and another 3 million in Syria. Most of the Kurds in Syria have come across the border into Kurdistan, which is northern Iraq.
Well, Dr. Law, after working with people, with the persecuted people in the Middle East and working with the leaders there, what would you say is the major goal of ISIS in your observation?
The major goal of ISIS?
Mm-hmm. Is it to really defeat the world?
It's all in their eschatology.
Okay.
They are trying to draw the United States and the Western powers into war in northern Syria, in the area of Raqqa, which is the capital of ISIS. They believe that the Armageddon that we know of in the Bible will take place in northern Syria, and when they entice the West to come against them with huge forces to wipe them out, that Jesus is going to return to earth because he is Muslim, and he will, along with the man that it's very close to our own biblical eschatology. But when Jesus comes, he's going to establish a caliphate for the entire world, and the whole world will be Muslim. And they think they are targeted. So they will be the ones to initiate this eschatological event and bring about the end of the world. They believe they're going to create the end of the world.
And I guess, why would they want to create the end of the world? Why would they want the world to end?
They believe that they will have done their job. There won't be a lot of people left on earth. In their mind, there'll be terrible murder and mayhem and everything else, but they'll end up on top, and that's the way things will be going down the road.
Okay, but is it really possible to destroy terrorists? I mean, to defeat them, because one group can rise up right after the next. Your subtitle is Destroying the Terrorists Who Want to, Defeating the Terrorists Who Want to Destroy the World. Is that really possible? And is it biblical?
It wouldn't be hard for our troops if we had a government who made up its mind to go in there and clean them out totally, to take away the caliphate. They're losing. They've lost a lot of ground in the last short while. But they are morphing into lone wolf terrorism that we're watching in America. It happened in Orlando a 3 weeks ago. And all these terrorist events that are happening, like the guy driving a truck down the road in Nice, France, and killing 84 people. Those are lone wolf guys who are out there, and they're going to continue to fight the West, whether ISIS is an actual nation or a caliphate. It doesn't matter to them. They're going to be the source of terrorism for the rest of our lives.
Is ISIS the greatest threat to the West and the United States? As you live in the Middle East, I'm sure you...
Well, it is to our peace.
Okay.
After San Bernardino, California, after what happened in Oklahoma City with the beheading of a woman by a Muslim terrorist, There are events that are taking place all over the U.S. And I think, as we know coming into an election season, that one of the issues that are huge for the American people is to have peace and to not have to fear sending your child on a subway downtown or on a bus somewhere, that there'll be no terrorism. That is their modus operandi, and they're going to keep on doing that.
Mm-hmm. But you're saying also, do you offer hope? I mean, when you look at a mother who puts her child on a bus and wants to make sure that child makes it home safely, and when you see what's happening in the news, how should we respond, especially the church?
Well, I think our time to respond to ISIS in the Middle East is shortening. I think we've got to do something, and do something soon, because the more time passes. One of the big things they did when they captured Mosul in 2014, Mosul in the Bible is Nineveh. It's where Jonah went to preach, in Nineveh. And when they captured Mosul, the big thing they wanted were the chemistry labs on the university campus in Mosul. And they're bringing in scientists from around the world to develop dirty bombs, to develop poison gas, all kinds of different sorts of ways of creating terror. And from a standpoint of hope, the only hope I had is in Jesus. And I'm over there talking to people directly. I led a young man to the Lord who had been fighting Peshmerga he was in the Peshmerga, the Kurds, and he'd been fighting ISIS the day before. And he'd had angelic appearances twice in dreams. 6 days before he met me, he'd gone into a village with the Peshmerga troops to fight ISIS, and ISIS had booby-trapped various buildings in the town. The commander told him to go and check a certain house. He walked over to the door, and from what he told me, an angel appeared beside him, held his hand and wouldn't let him open the door. And he didn't know what it was. And he asked me, because he was quite disturbed, very emotional. We were sitting in a Muslim hotel eating. He said, "What is this?" I said, "That's an angel from the Bible." I said, "Is anybody praying for you?" He said, "Yes, my sister's been praying for me for 5 years. She's become a Christian." And I said, "Well, God's listening to her prayer, and that's your problem, because God is after you, and angels are coming." And he said, "Well, what should I do?" And I said, "Well, you need to accept Jesus." So he said, "Would you show me how to do that?" Wow. And right sitting at in the hotel at the table, I bowed my head and
led him to the Lord.
I led him to Jesus, and there were Muslim waiters and waitresses moving around, and it makes you a little, you're wondering, you're hoping nobody notices, but I went ahead and did it, and he had a glorious transformation.
Well,
go ahead.
Okay, I was about to say, Dr. Law, we'd like to continue this conversation with you tomorrow on another episode of Harvest. To connect with Dr. Terry Law, go to worldcompassion.tv or go to harvest-tv.com for a link to his new project. It is called Unmasking ISIS. Coming up later, your prayer request, but up next, Brian Bush with the latest news from Israel. We'll be right back.